Hey, I'm back. It's been a while, definitely. But today, I wanted to have a chat about addictions and how they can be very easy to misjudge people, shall we say, that have addictions. Let's take a seat over here. So, addictions can be really, really hard for people, and they come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Some more socially acceptable, shall we say, than others. For example, you take someone who's addicted to drugs or alcohol. People tend to, they might not mean to, but people tend to look down on those people. But people with other addictions, say, I don't know, tattoos or something, don't tend to get judged so much. Don't get me wrong, they still get judged a lot of the time, but it's not in the same way. You could argue that, excuse me, over the last, 14, 15 months, I've become addicted to tattoos. I had 2 for 20 years before that, and then since January, February last year, I've had pretty much both my arms done. Addiction? Maybe. Is just fact I just like having them done, or for what they represent. I've done, I think it's my first video actually, I did that on all my tattoos and what they represent and stuff, although I have had some more since then. But would I class that as an addiction? No, not really. If I don't have any more, I don't have any more. I do want to get some more bits up here, but at the end of the day, I don't have to have them. It's not something that I'm driven by, or that, first thing I think of when I wake up in the morning, or last thing I think of before I go to sleep at night, or whatever. It's yes, I get the excitement before I go and have one done, and then there's the, it's, ooh, look at my new tattoo afterwards. That's all great, but for me, it's not an addiction as such. But for other people with other addictions, that can prove quite hard. I have a drink now and then. Most evenings I might have like a Captain Morgan's and Cherry Max, or a Fireball and Cherry Max or something. But again, it's not something I have to have. I can either have a drink or I don't have a drink. It doesn't actually bother me like that. But like I say, for some people, it really is an addiction. The same with drugs. I don't do drugs, and I never have. It's never been my thing. It's never been something I've wanted to do. I know plenty of people that do drugs, and people that drink and take drugs do get addictions, and those addictions are far, far more serious than sort of like somebody that wants to get tattoos done, or I don't know, I keep mentioning tattoos, but I don't know, anything else that you can get addicted by. And it is very easy to judge these people. And recently I've had dealings with a guy that comes into the shop, and he was coming in every day to show us, or every week I should say, to show us his token that he gets from going to he's going to Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous as well. And he'd get his tokens, and he'd come in every week and show us his token and sort of say, look guys, I got this. And me and one of the other girls at work really engaged with him, and we're talking to him about it and sort of saying, no, that's really good, we're really proud of how you're doing and stuff. But then he disappeared for a while, and then when he came back, he sort of said that he'd fallen off the wagon, and how disappointed he was in himself, and how, how bad he felt for doing that, because he'd gone so far. He had his 100-day his 100-day token before he went away. He'd done really well, and he felt really disappointed in himself for slipping. But at the end of the day, it's looking from the outside in, that's a very hard road to be travelling, and there's going to be some bumps along the way, and you're going to have some slip-ups, some accidents, if you want. But the key is that he wants to carry on. He wants to carry on and get himself sort of like dry and clean, which is very admirable of him, admirable of him, and all credit to him. There's lots of people in that position that give up and can't be bothered. And the people that try to get back out of this hole that they've dug themselves into are the ones to be admired, because they've realised that they're in a hole and they want to get out of it, and they do their best to get back out of it. Now, why they're in that hole, why they've dug themselves down into that, can be for all sorts of different reasons. Every one of them's got their own story, and they've all got this story to tell of why they've ended up where they are. Don't get me wrong, there are some people that do drink and drugs and stuff, especially with the drugs, that do it, and no matter what anybody says or does, they will carry on doing it because that's what they want. They just seem to have this will or this want to destroy themselves through drugs, and you can't help those people. You can try, but at the end of the day, they are making a conscious decision that that's what they want to do, and that's how they're going to carry on. But the other ones who are trying to get out of it and stuff, they're the ones that you want to help, and you want to try and help them as much as you can to sort of get through what they're going through. And it's very easy to judge these people as being scum, slime at the bottom, shit on the bottom of your shoes or whatever. And probably I was guilty of that as well, but sometimes it just takes something, reading a book or talking to somebody or whatever, to actually make you realise that you're misjudging them, and nobody's better than anybody else at the end of the day. It's, like I say, it's very easy to misjudge people or to come to an assumption immediately that sort of about that person when you don't know them, nothing about them, and you've got no understanding or comprehension as to why they are where they are. And similar to, I did a video on homeless people a while back. Same thing. People walk past them and sort of look at them as if they're sort of absolute scum. And again, some of them make a conscious choice to want to live like that. It's either it's all they've known, or it's just their way of life. Whereas other people, they're in that position through no fault of their own. And it's the same with drink and drugs. I'm sure people don't wake up one morning and think, I'm going to get addicted to drugs today, or I'm going to get addicted to alcohol. It doesn't work like that. And I suppose for the want of different circumstances, probably many of us could be in that position. I'm thankful I'm not in that position, as probably a lot of you would say. But, there's probably a fine line sometimes between not being in that position and being in that position. And sometimes just stepping over that line can have a dramatic and drastic effect on your life, which is what happens, I think, to a lot of these people. I say the guy that comes in the shop, you know, I really truly hope that he finds a way to get himself clean and to stay clean and dry and sober, because he's genuinely a nice guy. And I often find with the people that come in the shop, you know, that most of them are nice. You know, it's just they've just got this aura around them of sort of like drinking drugs or whatever. I mean, mostly drink, to be fair. But underneath it, they're nice people. You know, they're just trapped in this circle of, you know, waking up needing a drink, having a drink, feeling guilty about having a drink, then drinking more because they feel guilty, and on it goes. To the point where they just every day they spend in obliteration of with booze, and just, you know, it's sad. You know, I feel sad for them, because, you know, I wouldn't want to be in that position, as I'm sure none of you would be or would want to be. But they're in that position, and I think that all of us should look more at the person and look inside them, rather than just seeing the persona you see on the outside of a drunk, because a lot of them could probably do with it. And just a kind word, a nice word, or a hello, how are you doing, whatever, you know, sometimes means an awful lot to them. And it can be the difference between them maybe having a drink or doing drugs that day, and maybe not. I don't know, maybe, I don't know. What do you guys think? But I certainly think that if you engage with people that have got these problems and stuff, and give them a chance to talk and tell their story, I'm pretty sure it probably helps them. You know, I know it did with the guy that comes in the shop. He's had a relapse, and he knows that, and he's got to work harder to, you know, to get past that. I gave him a book called The Heroin Diaries, which, okay, might seem a bit strange I give him a book with that title, but it's all about somebody who was in that position of being a drug addict, heroin addict. You know, he'd have all his rigs and his needles and drugs and stuff, you know, and he'd overdosed, and then the next day he'd be back on it again. But he got through it, and he's been sober for years. And that book sort of like, I read it and it opened up my eyes to sort of like what addiction stuff can be like. And hopefully it opened his eyes up to the fact that, you know, I mean, this guy was in a deep, deep, dark place, but he got through it, and he's sober and he's clean. So I kind of hope that he would get something out of that book, and there's an album that goes with it as well, actually, that he would get something out of the book and the music to help him. And the music-wise, he said it really resonated with him. I gave him the book only a couple of weeks ago, so I've not seen him since. But hopefully that's had a bit of an impact on him as well, because he's a genuinely nice guy, and if I can help him in some way to stay clean, stay sober, then, like, you know, I'll do it. And same for a lot of people. You know, I wouldn't turn my back on anybody that needs some help, as long as I can help them. But you know, because the upshot of that is you could end up somewhere like here, which, whilst it's lovely and peaceful to sit here, it's not really the ideal place that somebody wants to end up, is it? But that's reality of it, isn't it? That's reality of drugs and what they can do to you. You can end up in somewhere like this, which, you know, I'm sure they don't want. I'm sure their families don't want. But sometimes the families can't see beyond the addiction, even though it's you know, it's their family. But anyway, just my thoughts on it. You might agree with it, you might disagree with it, but it's just something I wanted to have a chat about. So yeah, if you guys have got any comments or thoughts about anything like that, leave a comment below. I'll be glad to hear from you.